All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining us today. We're going to let folks get settled in. Uh, Apologies to folks that might have gotten an email a couple of hours ago saying the event has started. We had a bit of a setup error in the system, so apologies for that. Thanks for joining us today, Taylor. How are we doing today?
Hey, real good. We're glad we're here.
Glad to
Excited
have you here,
for the
man.
season. Yeah,
Yeah,
excited for the
you're in.
conversation.
It's funny. Today's like the first day it feels like fall. I'm in
It-
I'm in California, so it's like not fair for me to say that because every day kind of feels like that here on the West Coast. But for those that have been in the Southeast and have been living on the surface of Mars for the last 3 months, it must be a nice change.
yeah, I mean the Seattle area too. We had really nice weather all September thus far, and I mean literally today it just started dumping rain. So you can absolutely feel the change in the air. Fall's here.
Nice, I love it. Yeah, well, change in the air. Speaking of change
Speaking
in
of,
the air,
I didn't tee that up, but
you
speaking of
teed
change,
that up. It's great. Speaking of change in the air, thanks everybody for joining us today. We're going to talk about digital transformation. It's a topic that you might have heard about before. It might have been something that you've read in an HBR article at some point. It's a term that's been around today. It's been around for quite a bit. Today we're going to kind of uncover what that means in the modern times, right? If and in particular, if you're a general, especially contractor, how should you think about digital transformation? What does it mean for your business today? How do you crack the code to it? So that's what we're going to talk about. We have 30 minutes that we're going to chat through here. Keep it nice, short, and sweet for everybody. Just briefly, we have a couple of polls that are going to come out as well. So we'd love for everyone to interact with those. We'll have some time for Q&A, but if you have questions as we go, please feel free to pop those in the chat or hold them towards the end. Either way works for us. This will be recorded as well. So if you have some colleagues that would like to view it after, or you have to jump early, we'll be sending you the link to review that afterwards. So without further ado, let's get folks introduced to you. You've done a couple of our webinars, so some folks might recognize you. Give us your background and your career, and tell us kind of what your journey around this topic of digital transformation has been like.
Yeah, absolutely. So excited to be here. As you mentioned, Ellis, I've done a few webinars, kind of, with Briq marketing thus far, and had some great conversations with some of the GCs that use our product. But today we're going to really keep it high level and kind of talk a little bit about what we do on the post sales side. And I think just to kind of give some context as well too, as Ellis mentioned, my background is really in software as a service products, B2B SaaS products, over the past 15 years. My expertise is really in driving change using those products in legacy industries. So I've been with Briq for about a year. Prior to Briq, I was in an insurtech company, but I've really used SaaS products to drive change in telecom, automotive, for sales teams in a wide array of different industries that ultimately, I wouldn't say have challenges with change, but just ultimately have bigger transformation efforts that are needed with those operations, right? So, the modernization of the tech stack, the modernization of a lot of kind of whether it's automation or operational processes in any organization, is something that SaaS really allows itself to amplify and drive efficiencies with. So, that's basically my background. But it's been super excited to be here at Briq. We've really done a lot of work on the post sales team over the past year that I've been here, and I think today we're going to talk a lot about many different things in the construction space, but I think particularly what we see our best customers doing to drive great change, to drive that transformation, obviously utilizing Briq, but also, outside of Briq, and we'll kind of dive into this in the next little bit here, but, change in digital transformation is really people, process, and technology, right? So we'll break that out and kind of talk through that in detail and, really identify where those areas are that GCs and subs can be doing to ultimately use a product like Briq or just drive great change in the organization, for faster, better processes, better visibility, better analytics, and ultimately, a more streamlined business.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, Taylor, it's probably the one, for anyone that's on this call that is, evaluating Briq too. It's probably one of the most common topics that we come across was like, hey, look, I am on board for this. Like, yes, we need to automate. There's all these systems and processes that have been running in our business for 15, 20 years. We have this accounting system that's 20 years old. Yeah, I'm on board to change, but I'm worried about everybody else around me. Right.
I got PM members. I got other folks that just aren't used to it. Exactly.
100%. Right. So, and that's what this is all about. Right. Because at the end of the day, we're, as a company, the company needs to be on board. Now that starts with leadership, of course, right? It starts literally with the folks at the top to drive that. And today we'll talk about some of this, if you're a leader, if you're executive, CFO, even if you're, not technically kind of an executive, it's like, how do you kind of help drive for the company, drive that strategy to digitally transform? So as you mentioned, digital transformation, it's a term that's been around for a long time. I mean, I even read an article on Ford's digital transformation of their AP process back in 1998, where they were digitizing that. So it's been around for a while. When we talk about digital transformation, Taylor, what do we mean? Give us like how you think about digital transformation in the context of the kind of the modern landscape.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, digital transformation is not a new buzzword, new topic, really. And you've heard this ever since really the transformation from paper to IBM machines and kind of the larger legacy software providers, Microsoft, Oracle, et cetera. They've been driving digital transformation for honestly decades. For a long period of time. Digital transformation, as I see it in a more modern lens, is really utilizing, and especially like in a SaaS capacity, utilizing technology and specifically SaaS and newer user-based technology, to drive efficient motions in your business. So, this is really a mix of people, process, and technology. You don't just buy an F1 car and hop in it and hit the gas. Like, you have to be trained on how to corner correctly. What type of fuel you need to put in the vehicle, what type of tires you need for the certain road conditions. There's a lot of just kind of practical things that need to happen in order for you to drive change effectively in an organization. So, the concept of digital transformation is really, making sure that your operation is has thought through all the different tactics of what that's going to look like, from point A to point B, but then also the readiness of, hey, where are those laggards? Where are those early adopters? How do you kind of promote the change appropriately? And then ultimately, what is that end result? Where is the value coming out of the change? Right. You have to really understand what that value is. There's so many different products in the marketplace, and, there's so many different things that you can do within a business to drive efficiency. Where is that best calorie spent? How do you kind of put the sweat equity into the right thing to get the biggest, amount of lift and amount of leverage, while at the same time not causing a ton of friction and difficulty for your team in that transition process. So, digital transformation is really the culmination of understanding that full end-to-end, point A to point B, and all the different nuances that are in, kind of in that process of transition.
Yeah. And back in, I mentioned that article from HBR in the 98, like the digital trends, the technology around which people were transforming digitally was the computer, right? They were, like, how do I introduce the computer into the workplace, right? Today, that is really around AI, right? So, like, how do I, and in some cases, there's still paper being used in businesses. And I mean, you've seen it, you've worked in, other industries that are very big and often hard to get digital transformation. So you understand that, AI, is the one technology that people have to transform around.
For sure.
But there are, I mean, construction's not, everyone gives construction a hard time for being behind the times. And I don't think that's quite fair. I always say it's not construction that's behind technology. A lot of times it's technology hasn't built for construction properly.
It's a perfect point. And, I think, I would say really in the last 10, maybe even 15 years, the aspect of vertical SaaS, is really proliferated. And I mean, so many of our customers know this, obviously, things like Procore. Like, I mean, this is vertical specific technology that allows, for a certain function to be completed, with efficiency. Briq's no exception to that. We focus in the construction space. That's all we do. That's our bread and butter. And, the aspect of that really, I think, creates a lot of benefit is that you end up having very specific workflows. You have very specific tasks that a product can achieve, and ultimately that helps drive more efficiency within any type of operational flow, whether that's a click path that a user has to execute, whether it's visibility into certain types of metrics. Our customers want to see things in a certain view that a customer in telecom isn't just going to want to see. Like, it's a very different type of orchestration for how that data presents itself. And I think obviously with the latest kind of advancements in AI and how to apply AI to a lot of the different decision making and kind of automation that can occur in a space like construction, the vertical SaaS companies are able to apply that AI in a much faster, more expedient way. So, you think about the velocity of getting, something like an open AI type of concept into specific tactical use cases for construction or for a vertical. It's really those vertical centric companies, like Briq that are doing these things in a very, advantageous way that, can ultimately deploy things really quickly and figure out, hey, where is the best application for this type of new technology, right? So it's, kind of understanding, hey, this is what the majority of our customers are looking for and want. Let's take this thing that's, really, at the cutting edge and apply it to a broad, set of users that ultimately all fit a very similar type of cookie cutter because they're all trying to look for the same, either data or operational flow and so forth.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So part of this is, thinking about the some of the specific workflows and we think about this at Briq around, when you think about digital transformation. I'm just going to share my screen here again for everybody to illustrate an idea that kind of the digital transformation aspect of this. When we think about digital transformation in construction specifically to date, we've seen two, right? So we've seen the first came around that design workflow, right, Taylor? So like you think about, wasn't a SaaS tool necessarily, but kind of, Autodesk was a big leader, but CAD, BIM, right?
Yep.
Taking documents off of a drafting table and
exactly. Yep.
And putting them in a machine, right? That was kind of like the first big wave of digital transformation for that singular workflow. That next kind of wave of transformation we saw came with the document workflow. Procore, big leader there, right? Really empowered by cloud. That was the first kind of, cloud-based, Procore came against Oracle, which was selling, still on-premise, kind of old styles, old world software, bring it to the cloud. We're focused on the money workflow at Briq. And I think that's one of when we talk about, okay, where do I apply these tools? The money workflow is a specific workflow that is to date not seen a lot of engagement from the SaaS type technology that exists.
It's all Excel, emailed Excel.
Yeah.
I mean, so many of our customers that we talk to in this process is, hey, like, how do I take this thing that I've used and built in Excel from 30 years ago or 25 years ago? And, we've optimized it, we've made it better and more efficient, but it's taking that and applying it in a much more workflow centric way,
Yeah.
And I think, and it's not just Excel as well too. I mean, we have tons of customers on other types of products and ERPs, but, we see that so frequently with a lot of the folks that we're, implementing and getting live with the platform.
Yeah. And I think it brings up an interesting point too, Taylor, with, you think about like most of the software you see that's around the money workflow is that, is the ERP. Talk a little bit about how you see, like, what's the difference between, the philosophy around, of technology around like the ERP, like the classic on-premise big ERP and a more modern SaaS tool.
Yeah. Many of the companies I've worked at, over the last 15 years, and Briq is no exception to this. Like there's legacy providers in all of these spaces, right? And I think ERPs are a great example of this, is that the technology of an ERP is obviously very needed and isn't going anywhere, right? Like, you think about the foundational aspect of an ERP and, managing your books and making sure you've got, a very clear system of record. That's an essential part of any business. I would say that where vertical SaaS and Briq specifically plays really, really well, and it's this concept of system of record and system of action. These systems of record are very difficult to action in. There are lots of clicks. There's lots of different forms. There's lots of different, views that you have to go into. And the data is very siloed in how it operates. So it's very hard to congeal different reports and pull things that are, kind of looked at in a more, modern or dynamic lens. And I think you can do it in ERP. It just also costs you a lot. Like there's consultants out there that do, all sorts of development within ERP technologies, and they ultimately pay a pretty penny for that. And I think a lot of the folks that we talk to, very continually have done a lot of work optimizing ERP, workflows and a lot of the data that they put in the ERP and how they utilize it. And it's providing a great value, no doubt. I mean, they utilize it all the time, but I think, where we really see, the future, and I think a lot of companies would agree with us, is that, being able to have a very distinct workflow with just the right, right data at the right time for the right action for the right user, that's a exercise in governance. It's not exercise in kind of operational workflow. It's an exercise in, the right data, early on in the cycle, and pulling that data into places where it can be easily, pivoted and brought into other views and giving you real-time insights that ultimately, provide an immense amount of business value, right? If you have the ability to look at these things in real time or very close to real time, you can make decisions versus, compiling all this information, and then, spending time, actually getting it ready for analysis versus actually doing the analysis itself. So, I would kind of, once again, like peg Briq as that system of action on top of a system of record, because we have all of our, different connection workflows and different products that we connect to, within the ecosystem, there's really nothing that you can't bring into Briq. I mean, we bring, all sorts of different, on-prem solutions, cloud solutions, like you name it. But, the linchpin for all of that is it allows you to, you're used to, working in Excel, we look and feel like that, but ultimately that execution of that workflow is in a very, common place, which actually minimizes the friction for change management in the user base. So you think of how a PM works every day, or, a PX, kind of looking at their overall projections, looking at the different aspects of the project that they're on. These are all things that, like I said, I mean, they've been emailing back and forth with controllers and CFOs for decades, very familiar with that workflow. And I think, now that, a product like Briq, having governance and really a system of action behind that, it allows you to get really the most fruit out of your ERP and say, hey, like we want this data to be, certified and committed and really, kind of locked tight. But, we can get it in there in a much more efficient way. And we can really, allow these PMs or folks on the ground, to work in a flow that gives, the financial leadership team on the kind of the ops side and the financial side, that visibility and that real, kind of frictionless effort to get the analysis right for what they need to be doing in certain situations.
Yeah, 100%. I love that system of action versus system of record. So first big pillar of digital transformation is is technology. Yes, you have your ERP. We're not saying get rid of it. Obviously, like you need, there's nothing, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You get the idea, right? Don't throw it. You can keep it, but it is just recognize that you're not maximizing the efficiency of your business process, of your workflows, if you're not leveraging the vertical power of a SaaS tool, right? I think that's kind of the big takeaway there. Let's talk about process, right? So technology, having the right tool is one thing. And by the way, before we do that, I'm going to publish a poll real quick. Last time you bought a SaaS tool, interested to hear folks feedback on that. So you've selected the tool, Taylor. You might have the workflow in mind. You get the value of it. Let's talk about the process around which that tool will be used. How do you figure out tactically, from a process perspective, what needs to happen when you purchase that SaaS tool?
Yeah, I would say in many situations, kind of using kind of peer insights and really, what most SaaS companies refer to would be like best practices, right? It's like kind of how you think about, the usage of a product. A lot of times when you're buying any type of tool, like there's advice on kind of how the tool is best utilized. And that's, a really great foundational approach. When you think about process specifically though, it's really important to look at the end result you're trying to drive. What is that outcome that you're really looking for? So, is it, less clicks for a user or less, time spent on a certain type of task? Is it better reporting? Is it, more details into certain types of data? There's a lot of different aspects that people purchase tech for and drive change for. But I think understanding what that like paramount goal is a very important, very, very important kind of thing to solidify as you get into a transformation. As you think about the process itself, this is where like it honestly gets very tactical, right? Like if you're thinking about kind of that process and it's end to end, truthfully, things like stakeholder interviews and kind of understanding like, hey, look, like, my controller's involved with this process. A couple of my PMs are involved with this process. Let's say, obviously myself from a CFO lens, like, I need a certain type of data to best, provide great analysis on what we should be doing next. But, really kind of getting that idea of who's involved in this process and really who's going to be affected by this change. If, and I'll use a great ERP example. If, hey, you're deploying, a new process in your ERP and it adds 16 clicks for your PMs to go in and, let's just say you're doing a project initiation within the ERP and you've got to go through all the different, kind of loopholes and steps to get that set up. On the controller side or the CFO side, you're like, hey, great, I got all this project data where I need it in the ERP. Your PMs are pulling their hair out though, going, oh my gosh, this takes forever. And like, this is so inefficient. And, I've also got to, enter the same data into Procore, for example. Those types of things are really, kind of identifying the friction points at a tactical level, help you kind of get an idea of, okay, like where is the biggest lift going to be here? There's some people who are just like, hey, I'm driving this process because the benefit's going to be in my camp and I need that benefit immensely. But the downstream effect maybe to the end users or vice versa, leadership, to the end users is, compiling, Excel reports, for example, is something that, every controller we talk to does or has done in the past. Where is that friction point and understanding kind of with the process we're looking to achieve, who are the stakeholders involved and what ultimately is that concession that they probably need to give or negotiate on in order for the process to be well-defined and kind of equitable across all the different parties, right? Like the value here can't be, like a net negative over here, right? We need to have maybe some minimal friction on this side to give a net positive in maybe the executive side in those cases. So, really tactically weighing that out with, having stakeholder meetings, having, kind of a challenging conversation around what the output should be and why, the process change needs to happen is really that first step. And then, once the kind of solution is, being designed and kind of identified, how that process is going to be transformed. It's about, kind of maintaining that communication with those end users, especially as you get to UAT and testing and all these other pieces to validate like, hey, is that friction level we talked about? We mentioned there was going to be some friction. Is that more or less than perceived right now? Especially as you get into the testing phase, maybe you take, one of your best PMs or one of your worst PMs and test that out and see, kind of how difficult that change is. But that communication across all the different stakeholders is really, a key aspect to identifying the right process and ensuring that, that new process isn't going to cause a lot of heartburn and ultimately get a rejection, right? Where the PMs will just say, hey, this is causing us to increase our overall time spent by 20% on all work. Like, we're just not going to do it.
Like
right?
it comes down to that value question, right? It's like,
exactly. So anyway, I think from a process standpoint, it's a bit of a crash course. I mean, we've got about 5-6 minutes into it, but I think really, that stakeholder alignment across all parties is super important. And I think the last thing I'll say on this, which actually translates into transitions into the people piece a little bit as well too, which we'll talk about next. The leadership ability to say, hey, this process is important for these reasons. This process is important because we care about our PMs and we care about your workflow and your efficiency. This process is really important because we care about our analysis of our current state and making better forecasting decisions, better decisions around, where we're spending and so forth. Whether either decision is made, or in the middle, like of those two separate decisions, the leadership mindset around, hey, this is a process that like, I don't care if you're hitting friction in that initial cycle, like we're going to power through that friction. We're going to get this process launched and we're going to believe that this is the next way of the future. That mindset of leadership is so important in this because if you don't have that leadership, if you don't have that confidence to say, well, we've weighed all the options. We think that this is the best way to move forward. We're committed to it. If that commitment has wavering or can be wavered at all, somebody's going to find a way to push back and waver. Like it will 100%. Happen. Absolutely. So really making sure that you've got that kind of, hey, this is a strategic alignment across multiple parties in this conversation we've had, that this is the right way forward and we need to stick to that, at least launch it, run it for, determined amount of cycles. Maybe it's, a quarter or two worth of month-end cycles, and agreeing to, kind of the output of it, and then evolving it and optimizing it, as that process maybe gets, re-identified, or things change, and use cases update and so forth.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So process, we say the crawl, walk, run approach, which is like, pick a single workflow. Because I mean, you pull the thread on your cost to complete. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of things that happen upstream from that, or there's a lot of things that happen downstream from that too. Like there's, contain it, pick something small, and then as you go, you can start to kind of add on and take some of the more edge cases on and go further upstream or downstream, right?
Yeah, you think of that dipping your toes in, in kind of transitioning to the people aspect of this. Everyone learns technology differently, right? And
right.
It's really important when you're introducing a new process that you kind of have to slow play it to a degree. Like it's really easy to look at any tech, and especially in vertical SaaS, and say, hey, man, this thing can do everything for us. Like, let's boil the ocean. Let's launch, 15 new things and new processes for everyone at one time. And it really takes a strong demeanor and strong set of leaders to say, you know what, like, let's get everyone in this system with doing a certain task. Like maybe it's just one or two distinct tasks, cost to complete, for example. Like we're just going to have them enter in what what the projected cost is. Like that's what we're going to start with for now. Like eventually we'll get to all these other things that we know, in Briq's case that the software can do. But really kind of introducing that in a very, streamlined and kind of simplified way is a really fantastic way for folks to say, hey, like you've got this task every month that you've got to do in the system. Go ahead and do it, get familiar with it. And then as you start to get more familiar, we'll introduce, additional things that will provide you value and will provide us value upstream as well too.
Yeah. But, so again, digital transformation, technology piece, process piece, people. Taylor, probably the number one question we get, how do you get people to buy in? Let's say you're a CFO, but you got a really strong, you got an outspoken, strong, some folks in the field that are really strong and outspoken, or don't really care if you use pen and paper or a modern SaaS tool. How do you get people to buy in?
Yeah, the concept of buying, and there's lots of books on this. I mean, like, kind of from early adopters, laggards, all those different concepts. But when you're deploying a change of any kind in an organization, and then think of a big organization. You got multiple field offices, you got divisions, you've got different leadership within those divisions that all are kind of responsible for driving a change within kind of an operational process. That alignment from the top down is super important, right? Like that sets the tone for how an organization adopts any technology. Now, when you think of laggards and early adopters and these other things, you've got to use that leadership kind of mentality to find champions within whether it's a department or it's a region or kind of a way the business is broken out, right? So let's just use PMs as an example. Finding that one PM that's always, hey, I'm going to jump feet first in, like I want to adopt new technology. I'm always trying to push the boundaries on what I'm trying to do and trying to forecast and do these different things. Like this is a ripe type of candidate for becoming a champion of what type of process you're putting in place. The opposite of that is the laggard, who's always going to look for excuses and saying, my way has been like the best way I've done this, for the last 30 years. I'm not going to change it. Like I'm still going to email you my reports and have you, congeal it into a master file, whatever it is. Like I'm using kind of, specific examples there, but, the thing with driving change in those people is that top-down leadership of saying, hey, here's what we're headed toward. Here's what we're going to do. There's going to be kind of, some people who refuse to do it at first or laggards in that process. Really making sure, though, that you're communicating the importance of it to the team in a very consistent fashion. So, hey, this change is coming. We're working on this change. We're doing these things to get ready for it. We're testing this change. Now we're ready to launch this change. A few of the early adopters are going to be using it. Check it out. Okay, great. Now this region is going to be using it completely. This is the first month where we're not going to allow this region to do, any workarounds of any kind. Okay. Now they've got the next kind of phase of the deployment, and it really models to that crawl, walk, run methodology where you've got, kind of this easing into it where it doesn't feel like a tidal wave. It feels like a swell. It's not a wave like with a white cap crashing on your face where you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting pushed this. I feel upside down, totally like, tumbled in water. I feel like it's just a swell. It's like, okay, like, hey, my boat's coming up, but like, I'm not ready for that. Like I'm looking and I can kind of see some of this like ebb and flow. Like, okay, there's another month, maybe the wave's going to be a little bit bigger where I've got more responsibility and ownership that I've got to kind of transition into this. The laggard mentality is that it's not going to work. There's going to be issues with this. It's going to be a pain. Like, it's going to be a burden of my new process. I'm just so used to doing it my certain way. So for the laggards to see that, those early adopters are using it and it's saving them time, or it's giving other aspects of the business an immense benefit, that's the catalyst for making them start to change in those ways. So, if you have wavering leadership though, and you're soft on that, you're like, well, the workarounds are fine. We'll let you do that indefinitely. That's where you end up having a shift in the operation where you've got some people adopting and some people not adopting. And it ultimately is an operational delta that you don't want to have. So, kind of long story short on that, it's the consistency in messaging, the consistency in leadership, and then, ultimately kind of, promoting the value to those early adopters, saying, hey, look, like, they've already got their stuff done. Like they've already got, kind of the forecasted value. You ultimately want to, kind of showcase those cutting edge leaders as like the great change leaders that they are. So not an easy process. It's just really the consistent hand and consistent push that, the more you over communicate, the more you reinforce, that really drives, that great outcome of digital transformation that you're looking for.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So it's kind of that, like, hey, maybe let's not focus, like, it's like if you're a comedian and you're doing stand up, like you always focus on the one person in the room that's not laughing and you try to like you do them. It's like, maybe don't focus on the person that is buying into it. Right. Like everyone tends to index on, well, I got 2 PMs. They've been here a long time. Yeah. They have a lot of sway. They'll never go for it. It's like, well, maybe let's instead work with those that we know will pick it up quickly and just let's build the momentum there rather than try to convince, these laggards.
Exactly. Like, look, like with laggards, sometimes like you never get them over the line and you have to, kind of play hardball with it. And it's, we're just not going to allow you to use a workaround anymore. You can't email your stuff anymore. Like it's, we don't have a process for that. And so, it kind of becomes a force function. And, sometimes laggards, there's friction there and there's challenges there, but ultimately it's good coaching. It's good, kind of communication that drives that eventual turn of that individual into, kind of what the new process is.
Right. Yeah. There's no laggards on this webinar. Obviously you wouldn't be here if you were a laggard, but if you are a laggard, good for you. There's hope. Okay. Technology, use the right tool for the right job, leverage the modern, the capabilities of SaaS and your workflows. Number one, process, figure out tactically, start with one of those small workflows, right? Get that honed in, communicate with stakeholders, crawl, walk, run from there. People, introduce it. This is coming. Work with the ones that can adopt it. Let it swell, not top down approach. This is kind of the modern way digital transformation happens today, Taylor. Who are you seeing?
It is.
Who are you seeing? Some of the customers of Briq, what are they doing? What are the most successful customers of Briq do well when it comes to digital transformation?
We've touched on a few of these things already, but I think the first and foremost is that not trying to boil the ocean is super important. It's like launch simple, launch with something that, is understood, in maybe a different look and feel. And that drives a lot of the, just awareness of what a new technology is. When we launched Briq, you have that first training with folks, people like, I've never heard of Briq. What is this? Like, I don't know if this is a dialer on my laptop or it's, a piece of financial software. Like, it's like, I literally have no idea what the context is. And, it's about kind of really, giving the teams those tools to say, hey, like, once again, this is coming. This is something we've been working on. This is what we're trying to fix. Here's the problem that you all dealt with or we're dealing with that we're trying to resolve here. So, really being empathetic and kind of showing that full vision of why the change is happening. But, not boiling the ocean is kind of, I would say, paramount. Second is really that top-down leadership methodology of saying, look, like myself as the CFO or the CEO or the COO, this is where this company's headed. We have strategy that we approach, we have a good strategy that we're approaching with this. We want to be a forward-leading company. Here's the benefit that these things are going to provide for us. Once again, better insights, better automation, less clicks, less, friction and just, normal day-to-day processes. this is why we're doing this, and it's going to suck. Like the change is not fun. And I think, that really being truthful about that is a very, it's very easy way to get, folks to align with you. It's like, look, like no one likes to change. Like this is like in anything. Like I don't like buying a new phone every 2 years because I'm like, oh geez, like there's something new I got to this thing. Like it's another task for me to do. Right. So, as long as you're really transparent with the change and you're really saying, hey, like here's where it's headed, here's the empathy that we have across the business, here's what we're trying to achieve, you can end up, getting a much stronger buy-in from the people that are in that, position that are having to change. The last thing I'll say too is, and maybe this is just part of my mentality, and then, some of the customers that we work with, I see really similarly, is just kind of bringing the energy around it, right? Like, financial processes and automation in your operation aren't always the most exciting thing, right? It's like, hey, here's a different task you got to do, really bringing the energy, right? It's like whether you're running a training or you're running a meeting and you're kind of showcasing some of the value, bringing a great energy to that overall experience, it can really help drive, especially the laggards. It's like, hey, look, like, and you don't ever want to call anybody out personally or anything, but, kind of being fun about the whole situation and saying like, oh yeah, like, Jim, this is even for you, like,
right.
You're old school way, like we're thinking about you here, buddy. Like, just almost that kind of friendly approach of, hey, we hear you. We know that this isn't going to be fun, but we support you and we want to make sure that we're ultimately driving a better business outcome. That's what I see a lot of our key customers doing with, just how they do training sessions, how they've got, whether there's internal owners or even departments that kind of run, the operational function, making sure that you've got that clear vision for what's being executed, and then, ultimately making sure laggards are coming up on the new processes when you launch them is a big piece to that. So
yeah, and one of the great aspects of the modern SaaS company is like us is we invest very heavily. Taylor, you're the post-sales process, right? Making sure people are successful. Part of that is, look, we're there to help you bring that energy as well, right?
Sure,
help you to
that's on us
through that process.
Yeah, we get excited about what our customers are doing, what we can show our customers. I mean, one of the biggest questions we get in implementation is, what are your other customers doing? Like, how are they driving this more effectively? And we have a lot of strategic conversations about that. And everything's couture and personalized to your business, but there's a lot of learnings that we've seen off our hundreds of customers that ultimately provide a lot of value to the folks that are just coming on board today. So yeah, I mean it's a fun it's a fun process to go through and kind of deep diving on what the overall operational efficiencies can be made are, and really where you can get better value and visibility into the organization.
Awesome. Wow. Such a good conversation. We could keep going, but we've hit our time. Taylor, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. Really good insights. If anyone wants to reach out to you, have any other questions, we'll send out your email and the follow-up for after this webinar. Sorry, folks, we ran out of time for questions though. Please reach out if you're currently speaking to someone at Briq. Myself, Taylor, we'd love to meet you. Reach out to anyone you're working with. Happy to hop on a Zoom call and talk with you folks. But look, really appreciate everyone's time today. Taylor, thanks again for joining us. Stay dry in the Seattle rain.
Yeah.
And we'll see everybody in the next webinar.
Great question. Sounds good. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you joining.
Bye.